Greetings YouTube. Today we have the cardigan and the cat. As I've mentioned in the past, I am seeing a cognitive behavior therapist to deal with depression and anxiety. And as part of that treatment, we are doing something called EMDR treatment. And that stands for, I have to read this, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. What it means in a nutshell is that sometimes when you have a traumatic experience, could be from combat, abuse, rape, any number of different things, instead of processing the experience the way most thoughts are processed, it enters your mind and moves all the way through the memory process till eventually it ends up just stored as a memory with no particular great emotional attachment. Well, when you have a traumatic experience, those thoughts, those memories can be stuck, and they keep pinging on your anxiety meter. So even though the event is decades in the past, potentially, something you see can trigger the experience as though it's happening now. Not a lot of fun. And this treatment was developed to help desensitize the person to those thoughts and then move those thoughts through the entire cycle and eventually placing them into just memory. So you don't forget it. It doesn't go away, but it no longer has the emotional weight that it had before you finish the processing. And yesterday, my therapist and I tried this for the first time, and we decided to pick a memory that was isolated, one that was an event that had been traumatic when I was in high school. It had been a bullying episode, but it was encapsulated. It had no relation to anything else in my life, and my feelings about it today were fairly low level, so it didn't have a lot of emotional impact on me. It still did trigger an emotional response if I thought about it, however. So the way this works is that your therapist literally has you track his fingers. So my therapist took his fingers here, my head state, and he's doing this back and forth. And as he's doing this, you're tracking with your eyes his finger. Before he starts the motion, he says, I want you to get the image in your head, the negative experience, and he does this. And you go for about 15-20 seconds, and then he stops, and you take a deep breath. He says, okay, what did you think of? Where did your mind go during that experience? And he listens to you. Then he takes that as the next stage, and you start the process over again. And you do this as you're working your way through this till you get to a point where he feels that you may have processed this enough that you can try boxing up the memory. Literally, you visualize boxing it and storing it. Not ignoring it, just storing it so that when you need it again, you can take it out and experience the memory, but not the event itself. And one of the processes of this is that he helps to establish a safe zone, like a happy place where you can go to. And literally, during the course of this treatment, my mind led me from the scene of the bullying episode to my happy place. I literally visualized a journey that took me there. I mean, this was not a conscious effort on my part. This is what happened during the process. Now, it was interesting, but it was difficult for me to let go and let the process do what it needed to, because there's always this pragmatic part of my brain. It's the part of my brain that functions no matter what. It's the part of my brain that kept me alive when I was being abused. It was the part of my brain that no matter what happens, car accidents, house fires, a divorce, this pragmatic little voice won't ever go away. It will keep me functioning in situations where I might well shut down. But shutting down could get me killed, or the situation could get worse. And this little pragmatic voice has been a godsend and a curse throughout my life, because I can't turn it off. It never knows when to shut up. And when there are times when I don't need that little pragmatic voice, it's still there. And during this treatment, it attempted to assert itself. So I kind of had trying to do the treatment at the same time this little pragmatic part of my voice is trying to tell me, no, you need to do this, you need to do that. So it's a little difficult on occasion for me to let go and let the treatment follow its path. But it was ultimately successful. At the end of the treatment, you know, I visualized boxing up this memory and putting it on a shelf. I visualized putting it into a strong box, very similar to the strong box I actually have here at the house. It's a fireproof box for papers and things. And afterwards, my therapist and I were talking, and I'd asked him a question. He was answering the question for me. And as he's speaking, I suddenly had a mental image of the beginning scene, that initial image of the bullying episode pop into my head. And suddenly when I saw it, I walked this way and suddenly realized that it wasn't a three-dimensional image. It was a matte painting on glass. And as I got to the edge of it, I saw it's just a picture. It's not a real thing. It's not an actual experience. And it hasn't been in almost 30 years. Actually, 30 years, I believe, now. And that helped put it into a new place in my head. Now, I did this Thursday morning, and I basically came home and went to sleep because I work nights. And last night, I went to work. And the entire time I'm at work last night, I had no anxiety. None. And I literally cannot tell you the last time I had an 8-hour segment of my day without anxiety. My subconscious, which is awfully poking at me and attempting to push me into an anxiety state because it's this old memory of the experiences I've had over my course of my life, attempted to push me into that anxiety state. In fact, it pulled out all the stops. It went after the really big one, that my wife will die and leave me alone. And it didn't work. I just kind of chuckled and kept going and doing my job. Because I was having none of it last night. I just wasn't in a state of anxiety. And it was really quite astounding and rather pleasant. So now we're going to use this technique to go after more intense memories and ones that are linked to other things, because there are, everyone's memories tend to be linked a lot. Very rarely do we have completely isolated experiences. Luckily, I had a couple, so we can use those to start with. So that's been my experience up to this point. I mean, this has been a 24-hour period since, basically, since my appointment was at 9 a.m. yesterday. And I'm filming this at 8:47 this morning. In fact, I have to leave shortly to go see a wound specialist for my ulcer. Yay! So I thought it was fascinating, and the after effects are really quite interesting. And if anyone else has gone through EMDR or something similar during cognitive behavior therapy, I would really be interested in hearing what you have to say. Did this work for you? Have you ever tried it? Would you ever consider it? I'd like to open a dialogue about this because I find it really fascinating. It's a potential key to unlocking a whole lot of the issues that have held me back in life. Echoes that have just been going through my skull for 35 years. Frankly, I'm really quite tired of listening to them.